All right. So, Kenneth Atkins, Atkins, Baker. The Atkins is taken from my maternal grandmother's side. James Atkins was a numismatologist. Did I say it right?
That was his hobby. He was an upholsterer and cabinet maker.
So anyway, that's where I got the Atkins for my middle name. And I was born on October 15th. That's a good date, isn't it? No. 1923, you wouldn't know about that. And so if I was born in 23, it would be 28 when I started in kindergarten. So 29 or 28, 29 or 30 probably is when that picture was taken. And my dad, as you might remember, other people wouldn't, had a hobby of photography. That's how I got started at a very early age, grammar school. And if I get started off in different tangents, I don't know how I'll get back in, but anyway, I remember playing the drums in grammar school. And what we called them then was a full set of traps. You ever heard that? Mm-hmm. T-R-A-P-S, right? Traps. That means you have the bass drum with your right foot, the hi-hat, that's the cymbal on the stand, with your left foot, and the snare, and the wood blocks, and the triangle, different cymbals, and the whole set. So I played those in grammar school, and I don't remember what grade I started.
I moved to that school when I was in the 5th grade, and you had been in it a long time before that.
So I guess I started music, a lot of music way back. I guess in kindergarten, they realized I had rhythm. Some kids do and some don't. And I keep it on. That's probably why they made me the director.
Grandma, where did you move from? You said you moved into the school when you were in 5th grade.
Oh. Are you going to keep the interviews separate? They're so...
We're going to go together for right now. We're okay.
Tell who you are first.
Tell who you are and then why.
My name was Harriet Leona Bush. The Harriet was after my grandmother and my great-grandmother. Both of them were Harriets. And when I was 12 years old, I was given the Harriet ring, which I passed on because I knew I'd never name one of our daughters Harriet. So Kristen got it when she was 12 years old, and she lost it, so it's gone.
Oh.
I think somebody stole it out of her locker or something like that. Then, okay. I was also, when I was 16 years old, I was given a jewelry box that we just called the Harriet box. It had been given, well, it was given to me on my 16th, or just before 16th birthday, by my grandmother, who wrote a little note that I still have that tells about it, how her mother gave it to her when she was young. And we have no idea how old her mother was when she got it, but we figure that box is at least 150 years old. Okay, so that's my middle name, Leona, is after my father's oldest brother, the only brother who survived youth, and he died not too long before I was born, and his name was Leon. So I thought I didn't make a very good Leon, but Leona's fine.
Forgot your birthday.
Huh?
Forgot your birthday, didn't you?
Oh, I haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, all this happened before she was born. Okay.
Yeah, keep going. You're fine.
Okay. That my birth is another story. I was due in February 1924, but I made my appearance on December 30th, 1923. My grandfather had a mom and pop grocery store, pretty good one from what I've seen, not too far from their home, maybe 2 very short blocks. And instead of waiting till New Year's Eve to take inventory, they decided December 30th would be a lot better day to do it. And they and my parents and aunt and well, she was married by then. So the 6 of them were taking inventory. And Mother got to the point of, I don't feel good at all. I think this baby's on the way. So they sent her home, walking about 2 blocks. And she didn't have the baby until 4:15 the next morning. Oh, so they were taking the inventory on December 29th, because I was born on December 30th. So I have the date, month wrong.
That's okay.
Where did you live at that time? Where were you?
So we lived about maybe 9.5 miles away. No freeways then.
What part of the city was?
It was in Los Angeles. Okay. And anyway, during the middle of the night, they decided my mom really was serious about this, and they called the doctor. But he never did make it in time, so my grandfather delivered me. But that's all right. He used to be a farmer, and he had delivered lots of calves and colts.
Wow.
In fact, he delivered one of his own children because, in fact, my mother, the doctor was drunk, and he never did make it. And so my mother's birth certificate, it has a different name on her. It has same last name, same parents. But he decided, he named her whatever he thought he remembered that the name was. So it was really strange.
Now, what part of Los Angeles did you live in at that time?
West 83rd Street between Vermont and Western.
So right where now is considered downtown.
Well,
it's a little ways out from that.
If you know where Florence and Manchester are, they're kind of between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it was a brand new subdivision in Los Angeles, and my parents were the first ones to build a house in that subdivision. They didn't have money enough to build a regular house, so they decided they were going to build a double garage, actually a triple garage, because we lived in the part that was sort of like a double garage. It had, and it had a kitchen behind it, and a bathroom, and a porch-like where they kept canned goods and the preserves that she made and things, and had a door across to the little garage. So, in fact, when I was born, they couldn't take me home to their home for several days because it had been raining so hard. There weren't any streets completed out in that area, and it was so muddy. It was sort of a clay-like adobe type of stuff. And when they finally did go in, my father carried us in his arms from Manchester to 83rd. That's several blocks. And he had hip boots on.
And Grandpa, where were you living at when you were born?
I was born in Highland Park, Baltimore Street. That's right over the hill from Eagle Rock. And we moved to Eagle Rock when I was a year and a half, is that right? I think when I was a year and a half, they tell me. I know I was there at the time, but I don't remember. So I just tell everyone I was born and raised in Eagle Rock for a year. What's the difference? So, and that's where she met me then in grammar school.
Well, we moved to Eagle Rock when I was 10 years old from the place in Los Angeles I told you about. Only by then we lived in a nice big new home. But my brother was born with bronchial asthma. They had to sit up, take turns at night, sitting up holding him because he couldn't breathe laying down. And he had a lot of other problems too. I can remember they went through a lot with him. And the doctor said, well, he would do a lot better breathing if we moved to a higher climate. Well, my dad was a Los Angeles policeman, and it was a rule you had to live in the city of Los Angeles if you were a policeman. And so what happened, they moved, the doctor said, well, Eagle Rock is well known for its clean air, I guess, and as is Montrose.
Montrose, the Eagle Rock's the furthest northeast you can go out of Los Angeles and still be in Los Angeles. Pasadena and Glendale on each side of us. And Eagle Rock's kind of a little finger up, and it still is.
So we sold our home and moved to Eagle Rock at that time. And we both went to Dahlia Heights Grammar School at that time.
But she wouldn't associate with me, and tell them why.
Because, well, he was the grade behind me. He had had an operation. No, the operation came later.
But still.
He was just a grade behind me. And his best friend was in my grade. And he sat behind me. And back then we had inkwells in our desk. And he's just a scratcher type pen. And he kept dipping my pearls in inkwell. And I thought anyone whose best friend was that horrible must be a pretty horrible guy himself.
We're judged by the company we keep telling us.
No, it wasn't until we were 16 or so when we started going together.
And how did that start when you were 16?
Well, I'd known her. We went to the same church, which, by the way, is the United Church of Eagle Rock. Part Congregational and part Methodist. So they called it the United Church of Eagle Rock. That's another long story. But so we knew each other. Our folks, our folks were good friends. They played bridge and pinochle and stuff together. So one day, they took the kids with them on an outing to Arrowhead, one of the couples in that group, which they call the ONOs, right? Our night out. Once a month they go out, but they spent a weekend up at Arrowhead. There's one couple had a cabin up there. And a Norwood speedboat, which I really enjoyed driving. Anyway, so we went up there with them. And my sister was there, and two of us and a young man by the name of David Sherrill. And things got a little bit boring around there, and we asked if we go out to, what was the name of the club at Alpine?
Arrowhead Club.
Arrowhead Club.
Saturday night.
Wasn't a private club anyway, it was up. So we could do some dancing. Well, I didn't want to go with my sister. But, or wait a minute, no, I guess I went with my sister to start with, right?
Yeah, because Dave didn't want to go out with someone who was engaged.
Yeah, she was already engaged.
engaged.
So we started out that way, we started dancing. I'll let you tell the reason.
Well, I wasn't much of a dancer. Dave could not stand my dancing and said, well, I'll show her how. So we changed couples mid-evening.
So we ended up, I came home with her, and David was, not that it was too much, but we got acquainted. And then about a year later, I guess.
Well, it was that same summer.
That same summer, all right. Ona's folks had a cabin at Camp Sierra, which is up by Shaver Lake. I suppose you know anything about Shaver Lake, Huntington Lake, and Florence Lake. They're man-made lakes made by Edison. They can hold the water and then go down through the benstocks and generate electricity. And so anyway, her father came to me one day and says, would you mind going up to the cabin with me? Because he was so tired he couldn't drive.
We had a bad back.
Bad back, and I thought it was, excuse me, maybe not. I just enjoyed driving so much. Sure, I'll go. My parents will let me. So we went up there and I did the driving. And we spent a couple of days anyway, maybe 3, the weekend before we had to be back to work on Monday. And while we were up there, we went out for a walk. And I guess one thing led to another. She jumped off a log for one thing. Oh, I sprained my ankle.
A log.
Must be true.
A rock that tall.
But anyway, so she needs someone to lean on, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll be back to the cabin.
I think it was your idea. I needed help.
Whatever, I guess that's where it started.
What year was this approximately?
Oh boy.
I was 16. That's
We're born in 23 to 16, you do the math.
1940?
39.
Oh, no,
39?
38,
40,
39,
something like that.
whatever.
38, 39?
Yeah.
Yep. So we started seeing each other once in a while.
Yeah, that fall we double dated with Phyllis and Milton quite often. And one day we went bicycle riding, and down by Griffith Park they had a place where they rented bikes. And when we were getting started, he looked over at me and he says, "Harriet, what's your middle name?" I says, "Leona." "Oh, well, do you mind if I call you Ona?" And I've been his Ona ever since.
I don't know why Harriet just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but there's a popular song out there about my old Aunt Harriet, which I won't sing for you. It'll make you sick.
Somebody who had died.
So anyway, we started going together. In high school, we were unofficially engaged. And I knew I'd be going to the service, so we didn't make it official until, well, when I did get called in the service, I got stationed right here at Camp Irwin, the other side of Barstow, for a year and a half. And it looked like I was going to be there for the duration of the war. In fact, I took a job, I thought it'd be a good one, Softon. I guess I should lead up to that a little bit. You want to hear some of the stories. As the post commander's driver. But before that, I was in the field artillery anti-aircraft. That was something new for the field artillery. World War I, they didn't have any anti-aircraft, I don't think. So when World War II came along, they took a lot of us from Fort MacArthur. I couldn't think of the name all of a sudden, which is now decommissioned out in San Pedro. And that's where I was inducted in there too. Part of my basic. They sent us out to the desert as an anti-aircraft outfit. So it was field artillery, anti-aircraft. We had both insignias. Field artillery was cross cannons. Not that this makes too much difference. So I went through basic training, and it's pretty miserable living out in the desert. In a pup tent, if you know what that is, 2 shelter houses put together. And I guess the whole unit failed miserably. I thought I was doing my job. I was an azimuth tracker on a 40 millimeter. That means 40 millimeter, I'll aim at the camera here, 40 millimeter gun is aimed this way. The azimuth tracker, which leads the airplane, was on the right. You've seen them on the sailboats, they have a thing they crank, and that moved around. The elevation was on the left. He cranked it and that raised and lowered it. And I'd never been much of a hunter. I don't know how I got chosen for this, but you have to lead the airplane like you would shooting ducks or skeet shooting and stuff like that. Anyway, our outfit had a pretty good record, I thought. But anyway, after failing that, and I kept hanging around in the PX area in the main part of the camp. If you want to take a break for a while, we can stop and start hunting. So while I was in camp a couple of times, I talked to different people. Boy, what do they do over there? What do they do over here? And they had a dark room. Now, I didn't finish the story about growing up grammar school because my dad was a photographer. And my brother, oldest brother, as a hobby, yeah. Oldest brother took it up as a hobby. And they were always developing film and printing, using the kitchen as a darkroom and making prints in the kitchen. So I learned to like it. And in grammar school and in junior high, my best friend Herbie Hunt and I built a darkroom under his back steps. And I'm going to get way off the subject. Be sure to help me to come back. But anyway, I'd been interested in photography all that time. We eventually built one in our basement, a nice dark room. But I was something I laid in bed thinking about they might be interested in. Now this was in 6th grade, I think. We had a telephone line between my house and his house. I sold the Saturday Evening Post, the Ladies Journal, Ladies Home Companion, and the Country
Ladies'
Journal.
Home Journal.
Ladies Home Journal and the Country, what did I say?
Country Gentleman.
Country Gentleman. It was way back. Curtis Publishing Company. My brothers were salesmen before me. In fact, my oldest brother was the longest. By oldest, I mean, he sold them for the longest in their history when he was selling. And I sold it from the time I was probably in the 4th or 5th grade till the day I graduated from high school. I delivered it for the last time. Drove my brother's car around. So anyway, through selling magazines, we get vouchers. Greenies and brownies, they're called, look like dollar bills. And you can send those in and get all kinds of things. Remember the pool table I got at home, the little balls about this size? I got that with them. I got roller skates, all kinds of things. And one of the things I got was a telephone. It was a French phone that worked on dry cell batteries. Now this was the big dry cells, A batteries. And they worked neat. We got the idea, got string wires. Now we had to go across the street in front of our house, and then probably 75 feet across the big, it was an open lot at that time, to a tree, and then down 2 houses to his. That was quite a feat, just to get enough wire. We tore apart all coils and enough, the Ford coil has a heavy wire, all kinds of wire, and we had to keep it insulated and stretched apart so they wouldn't short out in the wind. And we shittied up the telephone pole, which of course got taken down a few times when the telephone company would see it there. We got it back up again, and we put a post on top of our house to get it high enough across the street and over the telephone pole. And we actually had a telephone between our house and their house, which not too many kids had in those days. Okay, but so we into photography, and back to my story at Fort Irwin, Camp Irwin it was called then, now it's Fort Irwin. I saw they were doing photography, so I asked to go in. What kind of darkroom do they have? And they were using what was called a theodolite camera. Don't ask me how to spell it. It's a 35 millimeter camera, and they would take pictures of tow targets. The tow targets at the time were a sleeve about, as I remember, 8 to 10 inches, maybe even 12 inches in diameter and about 15 feet long. A sleeve of nylon. Silk originally, but now World War II nylon came in. And each unit would have their projectiles, or 40 millimeter shot of a slug, we call it, about 40 millimeters around, about so long, I forget the dimensions. And they would paint the tips of it and part of the projectile with different colored paints before we fire them. So besides seeing the holes in the targets, if we said we had a hit, keep a record of it, you could tell by the color of the paint who hit it, which battery. And also then, the theodolite camera was used mainly for the 90 millimeters because they couldn't, for some reason they couldn't paint the projector, it was too big of them anyway. But they take pictures of it and record the burst, the hits on the sleeve with a 90 millimeter. So I got to go in and see in the dark room and could see I knew a little bit about it and got acquainted with them, so I got in there and developed some film, but it was almost all X-ray film. I mean X-ray developer. Quite grainy. It was for black and white, which was good enough for some of the pictures I was taking, getting my film free. I had an uncle that worked in the studios and in the motion picture studios when the start with a large reel of film when it got down to about 50 feet or so. It takes almost that much just to get the camera wound up. Remember seeing the old time movie? Camera, action, so on. They had to get the camera wound up first to get up to speed. That took a lot of film. And then they wouldn't be able to run very long if they had a short roll to start with. He'd take out the short rolls of film out of the can, put in a special can, give it to people who wanted it. Perfectly good film. So I never did buy black and white film. Well, not very often. But anyway, So I thought I would get transferred into the camera, what do you call it, photography section. But our stint was about over, and we tried to start basic all over again. So I started going around, I want to get into camp so I can get into that section. I said, well, you can go into the headquarters company as a, instead of a dining room orderly, they started me out as DRO. DRO, no, what was it? DRO
That's
pusher.
dining room order.
Yeah, but anyway, I was in charge of the KPs. Sounded official. They had a lot of guys that they had KPs, you know, as the different units come in. And for one thing, I guess I had more compassion than some of them. There were more fights in those outfits than you can imagine. You get some of the guys from Alabama and some of the Carolinas had never learned to read or write. I was very poor at it, but they needed someone to read their letters to them from home and to write back, which is something I didn't even do to my family. I was close enough I could get home once a month anyway, sometimes often. So I would read their letters to them and try and write it. Never did write well, but I printed, which I still do. And then two, they need to be taught. A lot of those guys, not a lot of them, a few of them that I remember dealing with had never used a fork in their life. They had big serving spoons, and for some soup and stuff, they'd use that. They'd use their honey knife. They'd cut the stuff up, stab it, and eat with their knife. When they got in the Army, they had to be taught how to use a knife, fork, and spoon, and how to set a table. And back then, I don't know how it is now, they were sticklers for having the table set right. There was a place for your plate with a knife on it, right of course, and a spoon, a fork on your lap, and so on. So they needed someone that would work with them, and I guess, anyway, I was chosen to do it. So I got out of the line outfit and went in there, which was a pretty soft job, but you didn't have to know much. But I at least got into the headquarters outfit, hoping all the time to get called to work in the camera section. I'd love to go out there and run one of those cameras and work in the darkroom. Never happened. After so many months there, they said there's an opening across the street at the officer's mess. So I went over there as a waiter, and you actually wore a white shirt with a black bow tie and waited tables. Because the officers didn't go through the line and get all the food slopped on their plate and go sit and eat like we did. Something else might be interesting to you. Our particular officer was a stickler for order. Everything had to be neat and ordered. And I have pictures if you ever want to see them that I took. The tables, of course, were all lined up. They were like picnic tables, benches on each side, seat 10 to a table. And they all had to be lined up perfectly. You get a string, stretch it. One guy at one end, one the other. Move all the tables so they get moved. And then you put the condiments. You know what that is?
Of course you do.
Our hotel manager knows these things. The vinegar was in the middle, and the ketchup, and the salt, and the pepper, all these things. The tallest in the middle down taper. And we had to get a string, the same string. Stretch it, and all those condiments had to be lined up. I mean, he was a stickler for that, which was good, I guess, for learning to take directions. I mean, what's the difference? As soon as they sit down, something else, we couldn't sit down until everyone got to their table. So the first ones in line, those that bucked the line, got up there, got fooled. They had their food, yes, and they sat at the table. And they had to stand there until the mess sergeant said, okay, whatever, dig in and sit down, whatever. So it was a lot of good discipline, which I think still helps me. So where was it? Anyway, I went across the street to the officer's mess.
I think that's because he was a real gentleman. He used good etiquette and everything. He was very kind and talked to people in a more civilized way.
Well, that's a good bringing up, dragging up. Yep, I have to admit, my mom was good, teaches us good manners. I could never get a good grade in English in school, but as far as usage was concerned, she made sure we said the proper things, not the way so many of our kids do nowadays. him and me went down to the, that sort of thing still rubs me the wrong way. But anyway, got a chance to go there and work. I worked there for a while, which was good because after the movies, they'd want to come in and get a sandwich. And they were always good for a tip, so I was getting extra money. And I got a job because on a day off, the day where the cooks work, I got a job in the PX as a soda jerk. So I made about 50 cents an hour and all you can eat. And I was like you, I could put the ice cream away. So,
Half gallon at a time.
well, they didn't sell it in smaller. They started selling it in quarts, selling it in quarts later. I'm not going to waste it.
It would.
But still on the
I mean, it
steps.
doesn't show, does it?
So anyway, you're going to spend the whole evening on me if I get started on my Army stories. I'll go a little bit more and let her catch up. But while I was in the mess hall, I met the camp commander, Lieutenant Colonel. And he took a liking to me. He wanted me to be his driver. Now, as a Lieutenant Colonel, you can officially only have one driver for a staff car. When he became colonel, which he thought he was going to do soon, one would drive a staff car and one would drive the recon to take all the big wigs out to Badwater and Furnace Creek and stuff like that. But he made me his recon driver. You know what a recon is? That's the next vehicle bigger than a Jeep, which is about the size of the new, what do they call the new ones? Hummers. The Humvee. It was a good size. Anyway, you ought to have some pictures of this sometime. That might be interesting. So anyway, I started being a second cook at the time, but then I had this chance. Much better. I had a pretty good racket as the post commander's driver. And during the day, when he didn't need me, I drove the small arms officer to all the different ranges. And that reminds me of a lot of stories too sometimes. We'll have to get into Army alone, watching these guys shoot. They may not have had table manners, and they may not have known a fork from a knife, but they could sure shoot.
So was this all after high school, right?
Oh yeah, I graduated in high school, got one semester in college. I tried to join. They wouldn't take me, I wore glasses. And nope, they didn't want me, but I got one semester of college. And now we need you, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel. So they drafted me, so I didn't get in the Navy. I had to go in the Army. But, so I went to one semester at Los Angeles City College with her.
Oh.
I graduated summer of 42, she graduated winter of 42, and started, did you start right away? I'm going to take you up here.
That September, I worked as church secretary for the United Church for that time in between full time.
And so, Grandma, what was your biggest challenge when you were a teenager?
Oh, I don't know that I had a challenge, really. I did well in school. I was a science and language major, and I took chemistry and stuff, getting ready for college. And I was very much into sports in the GAA. I earned letters, and I was one of the officers at GAA, and I didn't particularly have a challenge.
What is GAA?
Girls Athletic Association. When we went to college, it was Women's Athletics Association. And when I did go to college, I majored in business management, in business administration. And so I have my AA in that. And the day, let's see, we graduated on Wednesday. We were married the Friday before graduation. Because he had a permanent job.
Quote unquote,
we weren't going to get married until after the war was over because he didn't think it was fair for a mother to end up with children and no husband. And you never can tell when that might happen in those days. These were the final days of the war, though, well, for Europe at least. And then they went on to the Pacific after that. So that's what I did when I was graduated. I got a job working for Gregory Founded Inc. And I thought it was a permanent job. They thought it was too. We were married on June 16th. On July 4th.
We got our shipping orders.
Okay, say it loud enough so they can hear.
That's when we got our shipping orders. We didn't ship out until a couple weeks later. But
Well, they weren't actually shipping orders, but the whole camp broke up because our country had air supremacy. They no longer needed any aircraft. So he was sent to Texas, which is a story in itself too. But after we were there, we had a lovely home to live in, 2-bedroom vine-covered cottage with parking and garage and nice yard, and it was a really nice place.
one of the ladies in our church, the United Church, owned this and she was renting it. So she thought we should have it.
This was in Eagle Rock, or?
Yep.
Yes.
Right down the street from Eagle Rock High on Yosemite. About 2 blocks.
Yeah. So, anyway, we just got all nicely settled in that, and he called up and says, hey, I have a buddy here whose wife lives in Los Angeles, and she's leaving real soon to come down to Texas, and why don't you ride down with her? So I gave up the house and my job, and but first of all I called her, and her phone had already been disconnected. But that was all it took, is I wanted to go to my husband.
So you went to Texas, and what happened in Texas?
I took the train down, which was very embarrassing to me. I had to change trains to go at Fort Worth. I had to take a taxi cab to another station to go up to Austin, which is where he had a room for me to live in. And there was a very short time to get that distance, and I ran to a taxi cab. My suitcase came undone, and there were all sorts of unmentionables all over the platform. I was hurrying, trying to get it picked up. To me, that was very embarrassing. And so when I got down there, he wasn't there to meet me. And let's see, no, this is the wrong one. But I knew the address of the place, so the taxi took me to that place, and it turned out to be really something. It was a very nice room, just a bedroom with a couple of chairs in and stuff. And we shared the bathroom with, I think he was an osteopathic or chiropractic doctor. And it had a fireplace, I think, in the room. At least it had a niche up over one side, and with a curtain behind it. And I got to wonder, what's behind that curtain? I pulled it aside, and there were all of his patients in there. They could peek in at us anytime they wanted to. Excuse me. Just got over the flu. Anyway, we lived there for a while. I had to go out to eat all the time, and I thought that was just horrible. I wanted to cook here. I was a new bride, loved to cook, and couldn't do it. And I decided right then and there, if I don't ever go out to eat again, I don't care. Boy, have I changed. I like to go out to eat now.
Yep, she does.
Right. So we were there about
3.5, 4 months.
Yeah.
I think because
It was September when I left, and I got there
right.
in August. I was only there a month that first
That's
time.
That's right. And we had already been through our basic, I was putting on combat engineers down there. You know what that is? Building bridges with one hand and carrying a rifle with the other. Pretty rough training, I'll tell you. And I thought the anti-aircraft had been, that was even worse. And when they broke up the camp, the colonel had not made his full colonel, so he could only keep one driver. So I was out. His driver got to go with him wherever he went. But anyway, so we went to Camp Swift, Texas. Now it was 110, 120 in the shade in Camp Irwin, if you could find the shade. But it was dry. We got down to Camp Swift, Texas, which she said is outside of Austin. It was about 95 or not quite 100 if I remember right.
It was really
But it
hot.
was because of the humidity. And I lost a lot of animals, especially, you heard of the 10th Light. You're a student of history, the 10th Light Division made a name for themselves over in Europe. Anyway, they had an experiment, which I found out later was an experiment. They brought them down out of Colorado, a very high and cool elevation, and stationed them at Camp Swift. A lot of the mules just died in the first few weeks. Some of the men did, and they found out that was a bad experiment to put them in that much heat because they're just not used to it. Anyway, it was rough.
It was the hottest summer that Austin had ever had, the highest record that they had for heat. I walked here with a fresh diploma in my hand, going from place to place to place looking for a job. I finally, after days of walking and asking and everything and being well qualified, I ended up with a job in a dime store. And I'd see all these hearses go by, and they lost so many people that summer from heat.
Not just the military, but
Everybody.
that town was really something. What they consider went 5 times the size when the military moved in. It was a little sleepy town. Well, it's the capital, but still, it's a pretty small town at that time, 50 years ago. And the military moved not just ours, but Bergstrom Field, and well, there were at least 3 bases got put in that area. And you didn't dare go into town by yourself. We were told never to go alone, always in couples or 4 at a time. Some of those farmers, well, there were problems with their daughters, shall we say. And it was enough for them to swerve off the road if you were hitchhiking, wipe you out and go. There were some pretty gruesome stories told. So anyway, that helps the light a little bit. I wasn't going to tell any more Army because I can go all night with that.
Well,
But so you
While
found a job in a dime store? In a dime store. What did
Yeah.
you? What was your?
it lasted, 3 days or a week before he was transferred to Georgia. I worked for 20 cents an hour. Can you imagine that? I'd never worked harder for a living in a store or anything. You had to look busy every second of the time. If you weren't actually busy, you were always straightening merchandise and dusting it and acting like, boy, this was a big, great store and you're earning your money. Wow. But when he was transferred to Georgia, I had enough money left in the bank that I could either go home or go to Georgia. Guess what we did? We decided on Georgia.
It worked out real neat. And I was a victim of one of those volunteers. I think it was 2 o'clock in the morning. The first sergeant came and shook me and said, Baker, start packing. You just volunteered to go to Georgia to medical tech school. And I said, I don't know about medical. All right, but Bailey is before you. He's my ward clerk. Listen to me. Our company clerk. And he named 2 other guys before Baker. You're the first one I got to. You don't have any particular job. So You volunteered.
From the bakery school.
They needed bodies right then to go to medical tech school, which actually turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened. They flunked completely. They had to go through the basic again, and that combat engineers was rough. And I always had the story, when you're out there going under the barbed wire, you've seen stories on your back and pushing up with your rifle on your back on the infiltration course where they're shooting over your head. And they said, this is the only place they've ever found where you can stand in mud up to your hips and have have dust blow in your eyes. Texas was rough. So anyway, we went to Georgia. Of course, we were going to go together. I had to be shipped by train. And how did you get there? By train or bus?
I went by bus.
Yeah.
It took me 3 days or 5 days, something like that, of staying on the bus to travel there. But we had made arrangement that when we got there, because he didn't know where he was going to be and I didn't know where I could be, and so I was to meet him at the USO. And so that morning I got in at about 4 o'clock in the morning, very early, and I had an apartment and a job by the time he arrived there. At 9 o'clock in the morning, I think it was, I was all moved into a place where I found a room, again, where we shared the bath, but it was with a professor of Georgia Tech and his old maid sister. And it was a nice place to live.
Right across the street from Georgia Tech.
And we actually had a kitchen. They had a small bedroom, closet that they made into a kitchen. There was a aisleway this long. On one side there was not a Coleman stove, a gas burner. And on the other side there was one of those ovens that you could put over the gas burner and bake if you want to.
You had to be a good cook to get any good food out of that.
And I shared the sister's refrigerator.
Oh, yeah. In the bathroom, we had to go out.
And this was right across the street, just about, from Georgia Tech.
And you said you had a job? Where did you work?
I worked for the Office of Civilian Defense as secretary to the secretary for the county civil defense office. And it was a neat job because we had a lot of society women who volunteered to help in the USO and as gray ladies in the hospital and at train stations as, to receive people and guide them on their way and things. And they did things like, what's the name of it? The people in a block captain who was in charge in case there was an emergency and things like that.
Warden, I think it was called.
Yeah, it was. Well, I had Margaret Mitchell, the author of Gone with the Wind, as one of my employees. I had sister, Mrs. Gray, I think was her name. It's been years now. Her husband was the founder and head of Delta Airlines. And her children, one of them was in charge of the weather station, and then one was something else. It was a family affair to start with. The daughter of the founder of Coca-Cola Company worked for me, and lots of other well-known celebrities.
And talk about people taking a liking to people. They all liked her because as soon as she walked in, that's why they got the job. They knew where the apartment was and got her fixed. When I walked in, I started looking at the bulletin board. I started calling Rainbow Corners. That's what it was overseas. USO has a big bulletin board for people like us. You put a note there, have someone meet you. And I came in, I was looking all around, couldn't find a note. Somebody across the room looked up and saw me looking and looking and says, "Are you Kenny Baker? Turn around." "Yeah." "I'll bet you're looking for your wife." I said, "Who are you?" "Come on over here and I'll show you." She went back and opened the door. Here she's in there typing on a typewriter at her desk. Surprise. So we're off
It turned
to a
out to
good
be
start.
nice. We were there for 3 months, and it was very nice. My boss, who was the secretary to the head of the Department of Civilian Defense, realized it was Ken's birthday, and coming up soon after that, and so she baked a cake and brought it to us, and with free tickets to go to a golf tournament. And I forget the name of the man. He was just brand new champion of the world golfer.
I don't remember either. I only had eyes for her newlyweds. What the hell?
And we really didn't particularly enjoy the golf tournament, but it was nice to have that day.
That was in Georgia, the golf tournament?
Yeah, and I had made arrangements with my landlady to be able to use her oven that was bigger and stuff to make a birthday cake for him. So I made a cake, and here when I went to work, there was a cake for him by my
Made out
boss.
like a bandit.
We did really well there. We went to church we tried both the Methodist and the Congregationalist churches because we belonged to the United Church of Eagle Rock, which was a combination of those two denominations. And we went to all the youth things at night and stuff. And
It's real good being back in school again. You're just there during the day. And you're free evenings. I had homework to do, which only time in my life I ever got good grades because I had a good helper. She could read this. I guess you know I've had dyslexia, which I'm afraid I've passed on to all the rest of the family. So I had a hard time reading and still have. I had to follow down the line. And so it helped when she read it to me. It made sense. And I
has a
learned.
good memory.
So I learned quite a bit, I was supposed to, as far as medical technician is concerned.
He got
really
an
good,
A and passed.
which is something for me. So it was a good experience. That 3 months training, came out as a medic, and went back to a unit, and they had gone on, so I got,
Back in Texas.
oh, I had to go back to Texas. But instead of going back to that unit, they put me in the infantry, which is what I went overseas with as a medic. And I think we're shorting her a lot, and I've been telling most of my war stories, kind of cut you out a lot.
Well, in Austin that time, I had a good job. I worked for Taxes, you know, Texas, not
Tax
Texas. And we had these great big sheets that they used in, I'm not sure whether it's county or state books, with who owned the property and how much and the location and all that. You were not allowed to make more than 3 mistakes without being fired. Very accurate, and the numbers weren't in the same places on the typewriters that they are on ordinary typewriters. That was a real challenge.
But she was an excellent
I did.
typist, all in school. She's always been a good typist. I forget how many words per minute, but she
110 words
she would
per
really
minute
go.
back then, or that's not the same. But
But I imagine you were good at that job because you're very meticulous in what you do.
very conscientious.
So you did good.
But, and we got an apartment to live in. Oh, first we had this room in a big old house. It was pretty nice. We did have to share a bathroom that was quite large with the bedroom right next to us, which was another Army couple. And they said, now on weekends we're going to have all of these people coming in. There'll be soldiers coming in. We have cots down in the basement for them and stuff. I found out it was more than just an apartment. We were the decency for a brothel. Only we didn't know it until the weekend came.
They had the front apartment rented out to us.
So we looked very nice. But the thing that it really set me off on it was upstairs we had a lieutenant's wife who lived there. He was overseas, and she had all of these guys coming in and sharing her.
It's not unusual. She already had a child too, if I remember right. Anyway,
I don't know about that.
I'm afraid that went on only too much. Not as much as it does nowadays, but it was a lot more shocking then.
I got sick there, and here comes the man who owned the place into my bedroom one day without any knocking or anything, just walks in. I was kind of scared. And he let me know, I let him know there wasn't any foolishness about me, and there's my laundry over there if that's what you wanted. So he took the laundry and left. And I found from another couple that we met that her husband was being shipped out, and they had a really nice apartment, a great place, your own private bathroom, everything.
Means what?
Yeah, we were there 1 week before he was transferred to be shipped overseas.
That's when he came back, in case you lost it, after we got out of Austin, went back to Texas. I mean, out of Georgia, we went back to Texas. Yep, they put us right in with a unit that was heading overseas. The Battle of the Bulge was going on, they needed a lot of replacements. So, and that will open up a whole bunch of stories.
I went back to Nebraska,
What?
New Jersey, where he was camped near that, his main camp, and stayed until he left, and he was home every night.
Because I found out where the hole in the fence was. A lot of guys take taxis and stuff. And last night I was real late, and I knew I was going to be late getting back. I was getting caught. And I took the bus. I thought, well, what can they do but court-martial me? They're sending me overseas. I'd rather be. Anyway, so I went able, I was going in to stay with her. But anyway, that night I got the bus and rode it. Okay, so I go through the gate. I don't have a pass. But the bus driver pulled over to the side about a block before the main gate and said, okay, well, you guys without the passes, there's where the hole in the fence is. What have I been worried about? So he let us out and went through. Got in line just as they were calling the roll and stuff. So they knew what was going on, I'm sure. But as long as we were back and ready to go when we needed to go. So I got shipped over with the 122nd, I think it was, infantry. So I don't know how far you want to go. It's been an hour.
Yeah, we can take a break for a second.
Okay.
Okay, we're back on.
All right.
So why don't you go ahead and start with parents and grandparents and what?
Okay. I always thought I had really good parents when I was young. I was the only child, and so I got complete attention. Particularly my dad, being brand new in the police department right after I was born, he pulled a lot of night duty, so Mother was home alone and spent a lot of time with me. She bought a set of encyclopedias for children, and we went through those, and she told me stories, and we had a set of Bible stories, things that really got me started in thinking about spiritual things. There's an interesting story about my dad. You might like to insert in here. He was a rookie on the police department. Got the job right about the time I was born. And he had to go to training for it first. And as I said, we were kind of stuck at my grandparents' home because of the weather and trying to get us transported there. And so they would put up his lunch in a paper bag and send it to work with him. Well, one day when he got to work, he opened the paper bag, and there were my dirty diapers. My mother put the dirty ones in a paper bag, and boy, did he get razzed about that. Okay. His maybe a little bit more about his police department. He after he got out of his rookie situation, he was made a police officer at a police station not too far from our home, maybe a mile and a half or so. And one day when I was about 5 years old or so, he took me to visit there and took me in to show me what a jail cell was like and locked me inside. And I got to the point, well, I thought he'd let me out at first, and then I asked him to let me out, and he didn't, and I started crying, and I wanted to know why he left me there, and he says, it's because I want you to know what it feels like to be in jail. I don't want you to ever do anything in your life that would make you have to go to jail and not be able to be let out. So that was a nice thing for me. He worked on the ambulance. You know, they had to send a policeman out every time they sent an ambulance at that time. And he learned a lot about first aid and things like that, so he taught me a lot about how to take care of emergencies, you know, at my level at that age. He also, this was during Prohibition, and we had a neighbor whose husband would drink a lot, and it was illegal for him to have any liquor. And so his wife would get so disgusted with him and upset with the way he was acting and everything that she would call my dad over. And I can remember his bringing the liquor home and pouring it down the sink in our kitchen so that nobody would be using that liquor. And how, let me know how bad it was for our bodies and for the way we act and so forth. So that was a good thing for me. Game-wise, I was really blessed. Living in an area where I didn't have any other friends near me for several years. And because it was just so new being built up, not many people could afford to build homes. But one of my favorites was we had a relative who was a laundry driver who would go to people's homes and so forth, to businesses and things, and pick up the laundry and then deliver it back. And they got rid of one of their, like, part of one of their trucks, the back part where the laundry was put in. And my dad brought it home, and I had my own playhouse, which was the metal inside of the truck, and I used this as a blackboard, things like that. And being a policeman, he worked a lot with maybe some of the widows of policemen or other people like that, and made good friends. And we used to visit one woman quite often after her husband was killed or died, I'm not sure which. And she gave me a great big, must be about that size, glass marble, a crystal one with lines around it and stuff, which was really neat. She has a cat in her home, and I could roll the marble along, the cat would chase after it and stuff. But she also later on gave me one of her children's choice toys, which was a small pony, must have been about that high, about that long, with real pony skin on the outside, a real, and a mane of real horse hair and stuff, and it had a harness on, and it was put on the bottom of something that I could rock back and forth and make it go. Not really the rocking of motion back and forth, which is a really neat toy for me to have. And when I was old enough, my dad bought a 3-wheel tricycle otherwise for me, and it had a little place for tools on the back, because regular cars had a toolbox on the back of them at that time. And he got, whenever he got a new license plate, I would get the license plate on the back, and it had a little horn-like thing. Well, it was more, it was a round metal thing, and you pushed a little thing, it goes zing zing like. And he fixed some lights on it. He really doted on me, being the only child. I had lots of wonderful experiences then. I was 6.5 years old when my brother was born, the first child in the family besides me. And I got a little bit jealous of him, not because I felt any less loved, but because he had all these physical difficulties. I told you about how he had to be held up and stuff. Finally, he was able to lay in a baby carriage with pillows up high enough so that he could breathe. And it was my job when Mother got meals or things like that, I had to rock him back and forth while he cried at the top of his lungs. I got so tired of that. And I can remember biting him at one time. I got so
My sweet wife.
angry. See, I haven't always been an angel. You certainly know I'm not, no. But because I bit him and made him scream, Mother knew the difference, and she came running in from the kitchen. What did you do? What makes him scream like this? And so forth. I had to confess that I bit him. And I had to sit on a chair in the corner, my back to everything else that was going on. To me, that was the worst punishment I could have, not being able to say a word or to see anything that was going on.
That's how the teachers used to punish kids in the schools too. It's not, you go sit in the corner.
My mother had been a school teacher for a while. Maybe that's where she learned it. There were several times when I did something that was displeasing to them. I may have gone to visit a neighbor without telling them first that I was going or something like that. And I had to go out in our apricot tree and pick a switch. A little narrow thin thing. It couldn't be a great big heavy thing. It had to be this new growth and everything. Especially when the buds are on it, all these little nodules where the leaves were coming out. And I had to pick my own thing to have them spank me with my bare legs, no slacks those days. I learned quickly to be good.
They hit you on your legs, or?
Yeah, up on my legs where it really stung.
Something my mom did too a couple times. We had to go cut one off the apricot tree. You ever seen a branch of an apricot tree, all the little nodules?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Another nice toy that I had was, we had a boy who lived next door who was in junior high school, I believe. Maybe he was clear in high school. And he was into athletics of gymnastics and things like that. And his father had built a place with bars and you know, solid bars and swinging bars like trapezes and all sorts of things for to work out on. So my dad bought one for me over a sand pile, and I really became quite good at athletics. Before my brother was born, because we had a lot more money than other people did at that time, even though we didn't earn very much, Dad took a half cut in salary. I don't know how much he got originally, but I know when I was in high school he earned $200 a month. So it probably was more like $100, and he had to take a $50 cut in salary, so we only had whatever was left. But he had enough that we went to the movies every week or two. And so I got to see lots of movies. I can remember seeing some of the first sound movies that came out, and they always had acrobats and dancers and different talent shown while they were rewinding the film. And I think the thing that really got my parents was they had drawings for things. Sometimes they were giving parts of sets of dishes. You'd get one plate this week and another plate the next week or whatever. And you'd go on the weeks when they were giving what you wanted. And as a special prize at the movie when I was young, my ticket drew a cedar chest. And I still have that cedar chest. It was given to me. It was my ticket. My dad had to go up and claim it, but he did that.
That brings back a lot of memories.
As far as hobbies and that sort of a thing was, when by the time I was about 8 years old, I didn't like the fact that my mom made all my clothes. She would make them out of her old stuff because it was still close enough to depression. You really had to cut down what you spent. In fact, if you get a hole in your shoe, you put part of a cereal box in until it wore out, and then you put another cereal box in. But anyway, she would put bias tape on for decorations, and a lot of my friends had store-bought clothes, and they weren't decorated like that. And so I learned to sew. When I was 12 years old, I was making all of my own clothes. Well, before then, 10 years old, because it was before we moved Eagle Rock. And I've always been interested in sewing. For a long time, I thought I might be a dress designer because I had a lot of talent in my sewing and in being innovative and decorating things and so forth. I gave that up when I was to go away to college. I wanted to go to a special school where they taught that sort of a thing for home economics teacher, and my parents wouldn't let me go away from home to go to school, so I lost all enthusiasm. I was going to go back to Michigan and live with my Aunt Allie and go to the University of Michigan. No sirree, that was too far from home.
And you wouldn't have been able to be married.
Yep, things worked out a lot better.
Never know, I've been a lot better though.
So other than that, I guess I like to embroider and do all sorts of embroidery things like that. Okay, back to Grandpa.
Well, go into what we thought about what you thought about church and God. You said when you didn't think much about it when you were young, but then when you were after the war.
Not really, because we just never had discussions. Not like it is in our church now. We didn't learn much about the Bible or scriptures of any kind. When I was old, really young, cradle roll they call it, I could recite the books of the Bible, so when a Bible was presented to me during church, I learned them in Sunday school and they took me up. But that's as far as religion. I just didn't think too much about it. When the war started and I was in high school and I told you they wouldn't take me, so I went to college, I started thinking a little bit more about it, asking some questions, and one of my best buddies was killed, died by me in an accident in Hawaii. I thought a little bit about it then, went to the funeral, wondered why, I didn't have the actual words, where did we come from, why are we here, and where are we going, that sort of thing. But the question started forming. When I did get called in the service, you go to whatever chaplain was assigned to the base you're on. So whenever you went from base to base, you want to go to church. Unless you were Jewish, they had their own service. But all the Protestants, or the Catholics had their own too. The Protestants just went to a chapel service wherever it was, whether out in the open field or so on. If they had a Presbyterian or Congregated Methodist or whatever, he gave the sermon and taught. And a lot of guys were starting to talk about, do you think there really is a God? And so why is he allowing this to happen and all this war and so on. Started me thinking about it. So when I came home, went back to the old United Church of Eagle Rock, and at that time we had an organization. It's called the S&Ds, for singles and doubles, married couples and those that are still single. And I guess it was the first year after I was back, I was elected to be the president of it, or I guess it fell to me. I don't know if elected, heard much phenomenon, but anyway.
It was when Nick was born.
So it was my job to figure out what we would do in our different meetings. And talking to some of them, I said, I'm really curious about what the minister believes, and I asked him questions. He gave me a different answer than what someone in the service gave. And they said, why don't we find out? So I said, I'm all for it. So I got permission to invite the ministers from all the churches in Eagle Rock to come and talk to us. What was it, every month or every other
There
week?
were, no, once a month, and
Once a
there were
month.
17 churches, but they didn't all accept.
No. But anyway, it took a long time, so once a month we could have one of the ministers from that community come in and talk to us. This is on a Sunday evening. And the more we talked, I got the feeling the more they felt the way I did. But the minister last week gave us this answer to a question. Someone else gave a different answer. And we were getting more and more confused. And I think our minister was too. He didn't always attend our meetings, but he'd go there once in a while. So we ran through the gamut, all the ones that I could contact that would come and talk to us. And I says, I don't know how much we've accomplished. I've gone through all the churches in town, and I'm still as confused. And my secretary spoke up, the secretary of this group, but you haven't heard my doctor talk. I mean, she was a nurse for a Dr. Lowell W. Curl, right there in Eagle Rock. And the church wasn't in Eagle Rock. The Mormon church was in Glendale. It wasn't big enough to have one in Eagle Rock. And I asked her, what do you mean? Well, he's a Mormon. I says, what's that? Didn't know anything about it. But he accepted, so the next meeting he came and talked. And the more he talked, people kept looking at each other. He'd answered most of our questions before the question and answer period came at the end of his spiel. I thought they had maybe a half hour to talk, and then we had question and answers. And they went on, and finally, a lot of people said, that's great, but it must have been an hour or so. I said, we do have refreshments tonight. We've got to let the doctor go. Being a true Mormon is, no, it's all right. I can stay the rest of the night. But we did stop long enough to have our refreshments.
A lot of people were hiring a babysitter.
That's
to
right,
be there.
and we came back afterwards. And he stayed a long time. He answered a lot of questions. So, of course, we asked, how do I get invited? How do I go to church? He told us what time their meetings were. It was in the afternoon at the time. So we'd go to our meeting in the morning and go to their meeting in the afternoon. It wasn't long till I think our minister was very unhappy with the outcome of that discussion period.
Looking back on it, I think 17 people became members of the church. Not directly from that, but children of people who were there and so forth. But there were several who did join the church.
They joined the church. And later on, even when I was, I forget how much longer it was, I met one of my mother's friends, and he pulled me aside and says, yeah, we joined too. I won't tell you what he said. I don't know who's going to see this. But when I told my mother about it, not him. It couldn't be. He wouldn't do it. He had more sense than that or something like that. And she got bitter tongue for saying that. Let me know what she really thought. She wouldn't think one of her friends had been a member of that church for many years. Because I found out in a number of ways that they're all heathens to join that church. It was a cult, all kinds of things. My brother had already put a stop to discussions with his family. because his daughters were going out with Mormon boys. And how would it look if you married a Mormon boy? You're on the minister of the church. So anyway, we bucked a lot of opposition in both of our families because we were the only members that ever joined the church, left their church.
But didn't Grandma get baptized first? And then
Oh yeah, she saw the light right when 55 she was baptized. And I was still getting a lot of opposition. I didn't get baptized till 58.
I think he's overlooked a lot of things that,
Well, yeah.
as we were going together, we would sit and talk for hours about religion. That this was before you went
Oh,
in the
yeah.
Army. And as I read the Bible or we heard sermons in church, we realized that there was a lot of difference of opinion between what the Bible says and what ministers said. And one minister didn't agree with the other. We started asking a lot of questions of various ministers. His brother was a minister. I had a lot of friends who were ministers because my parents owned a cabin up in the mountains that was a religious campground. And I'd ask all these people, everybody had a different answer. What really came down to it, I think, was the same minister who had, when we finally had these discussions, was that we asked him, well, what happens when we die? And he said, well, some people think this, some people think this, some people think this. You make up your own mind.
Talk about wishy-washy, huh?
So, and he was very upset with us because we were advisors of the youth department at the time. We had Sunday night meetings and monthly parties and different things for the youth of the church, and we were setting a very bad example.
Asking questions.
Yeah, but I think maybe, well, his grandparents were very religious, but he didn't know his grandpa very much at all, and his grandma was very so strongly religious she was almost prejudiced against things. Yeah, but the things I learned, well, first of all, the Bible readings that my mother did, the stories and things, were a very good impression for me. My mother was the head of the primary department, which was early school years in that church. And we had daily vacation Bible school and things like that. My grandmother would invite me to come spend a week or so with her at her marked grocery store, and I was taught a lot from her about religion and things. And she told me one time of a dream, for instance, that my family were great coffee drinkers, particularly my mother's family. They were from Dutch extraction, and Dutch people drink a lot of coffee and so forth. And it was a neighborly thing to do. Whenever anyone came, you give them a cup of coffee, which people still do a lot. But she had a dream one night that she must not drink any more coffee. It was very bad for her. It was bad for her health. And so she quit drinking coffee. And there are many, many things that she had special dreams or felt the Spirit. And she recognized that the Spirit, that we're guided by the Spirit in many ways. So it was very easy for me when we learned about such things to readily adapt to it myself. And my great-grandfather was, I went to visit him when I was probably in somewhere between 10 and he died when he was 13. So somewhere in that time period when I was 13, not him. And as he lay there in bed recovering from, probably this was just before he died, he had a crystal radio in his bedroom, and I was very impressed with it. I hadn't seen one before, and he was telling me it's a very marvelous thing to be able to listen to the radio and hear these various things. But I know that eventually that the gospel will be taught to us from the rooftops of houses, that we will all know and be what religion really truly is about. And that helped me again in being open-minded in hearing these new ideas that were new ideas to me, because that the Mormon Church teaches. But I could understand it. I would listen with an open heart, and I tried very hard to prove that the church wasn't true, because when this man came to visit us, we kept asking for a Book of Mormon. And he said, sure, I'll get one for you, but it never appeared, even though we went to church at his church every Sunday. And so finally, out of desperation, I went to the library and found one there. And as I nursed Nick, as a tiny baby, I would spend my time reading the Book of Mormon, and then every book about the church and against the church that I could find in the library. And I really wanted to make the right choice. But as I read the Book of Mormon, I prayed about it before. I didn't know anything about what it says in the back of the Book of Mormon. But I prayed that I would know what the truth really was, that I would make the right choice in doing this. And I knew just as clearly as could be, way before I finished the Book of Mormon, that it really was the truth. And that helped me accept also. But my grandparents and my parents were all very good examples of a Christ-like life insofar as they were taught and understood. They were very charitable, very thoughtful people. And that made a big impression on me too.
Again, we're reading and understanding what you're reading helps. Eventually I got the Book of Mormon on tapes, and that helped a lot. But that was many years later. It seemed like you had another question you wanted to ask her from way back. Her childhood? Or was it?
No, pretty much, because we went through her hobbies and what she liked to do, and her parents. Let's see.
How about the influence other people had on us?
Yeah, that would be good.
Not just my grandparents and my parents were good influences, although I tell you just briefly, my father would give the shirt off his back. He took money during Depression time, all we had left, and gave it to someone who was in need, in my presence. And several times he did things for that family that was really down and out and helped them so much. My mother was always taking flowers to people and doing kind little things like that. My grandmother, my grandparents had a grocery store, just a mom and pop grocery store, and Grandpa was there by 6 o'clock, I guess, every morning, and didn't close until after 9, maybe 10 o'clock at night. They lived in that grocery store most of the time. Grandma had one day off a week that she would go clean house and do things at home that needed to be done. But as she was confined in the store, they would take turns waiting on people, so if one wanted to take a nap and it was the time of day when it wasn't too busy, they were able to do that. But she used a lot of her time using fruits maybe that were getting to the point where you don't want to sell them anymore, but they were still good. She would make jams and things. She would bake pies and different things for people. She loved to do handwork, And she's the one who taught me how to knit and how to crochet and embroider, although my mother helped a little on that. But she was always buying little tiny dolls and making doll clothes. She made bibs, she made pillowcases, aprons, baby clothes, all sorts of things to give to people who owed them money for the groceries that they couldn't afford to buy for themselves. My grandparents had this great big long list of people who they just gave groceries to because they knew these people were destitute and felt confident that the people would repay them sometime when they could. Grandpa would deliver groceries to their customers when they felt the need, and so he would go out and deliver all these things. If there was a new baby, if someone was sick, at Christmas time or whatever, they would do really special things for these people, and it made a big impression on me. I had an aunt who was really special to me, and she was always praising me for my thoughtfulness and helping her. Oh, I'm good at doing this, helping in the kitchen or whatever it is. She made me feel good about myself. And I had another aunt who expressed herself in a much different way. She was very clothes conscious, and she wanted me to have nice things, and she'd see things that I guess you'd call it a yard sale now, but she was a secretary for like Robinson's and things like that. And other women who worked there would be getting rid of some of their perfectly nice clothes, and she would say, oh, that's about my granddaughter's size, and she'd give me these clothes and things. So I had a lot of love in my life. Oh, my grandmother also said I had a great imagination, because when the family got together when I was little, I used to go in the parlor. The family seemed to meet around the dining room table a lot, or in sort of a family room next to it. And I would make up all of these games and things, and I just entertained myself so well. And so she made me feel good that I had a good imagination, stuff like that. And Grandpa has a lot of people who made him feel good about things too.
Yep. I don't know where you want to start.
Frederick?
First thing I thought of when you said that helped me was in high school. And as we said before, I was interested in music. And I got in junior high right away. I'd been playing the drums before that, and my mother let me get a clarinet. Started playing clarinet. And some of the teachers, I won't go into gruesome details, but she fired one because we came in instead of doing that. He was teaching me drum beats, and I was teaching him some instead of learning to play the clarinet. But when I got into junior high, the music teacher, Frederick Group, was a very good teacher. Remember seeing the motion picture, missed somebody's opus?
Mr. Holland's opus.
Holland's opus. Did you see that movie? Nancy and Kathy took us to see that. That was the only time we'd been in a motion picture theater for 30 years, I guess. But they took us to see that a few years ago. That's the kind of a teacher Mr. Roop was. Didn't do very good in, like I said, in English. Some of the other classes I didn't do pretty good in math because I like numbers. But he made me feel like I was worth something. And I'd be in the band. I was in chorus. I was in even the girls' glee club one time, because they didn't have a boys' glee club that year. And two of us, Muzan Morgan and I, both signed up. We wanted to be in glee club. And if you haven't heard of Glee Club, I don't know why they call it that. Do you sing with Glee? Anyway. And they informed us they weren't going to have a Glee Club for boys that year. There weren't enough signing up. And the principal smiled and says, unless you want to join the girls' Glee Club. We looked at each other and said, why not? So we did. And he thought he was going to, we'd be in there for a week and we'd get so much razzing they'd kick us out. but the teacher was sharp, and she arranged some pieces where our voices didn't fit into it, and we put the whole semester in. Did some pretty good stuff anyway. So because of teachers like that, it made me feel like I was worth something, especially Mr. Roop would trust me with his car during orchestra. He lived not too far from where he did, around the block. I'd go over there for my lessons, and he'd say, "Kenny, I forgot so-and-so on the front hall. Would you take my car, give me the keys? Take my car and go home and get it." Well, you think that didn't make me feel important in front of the whole orchestra, that I would be trusted to drive his car.
How old were you then?
Junior high school, how old was I? 16?
I don't know how old you were.
Wasn't junior high, it was senior high.
It's probably senior.
Senior high, because, yeah, because I was a year behind, like she said. Graduated in 42, so I was 19, because 43 I could turn 20. So 19, 18, 17. Could have been a junior. 16-year-olds, I got. You get your license then when you're 16. Got me in trouble. Anyway, because of things like that, he made me feel like I was really worth something. He kept saying, you don't have to be smart in math or in English to do something with yourself. So he helped me. And my homeroom teacher did the same thing. She'd have me go get her car. I always wondered if they were in cahoots. Once in a while, she'd have me go get her car out of the garage, parked 2 blocks away. She had a nice new Buick. And I'd go get it and back it out of the garage and bring it up in front for her to go load her stuff. And she didn't have to carry stuff down the street. So anyway, thanks to some good teachers, I guess I turned out fairly decent.
Was that Maureen?
Maureen Meyer, yep.
She was a cousin.
Second cousin. So anyway, thankfully I had some good teachers like that.
And your neighbor, avocados?
Oh, Kelsey, yeah. Yeah, he had 4 different old cars, 1913 Stearns Knight. Boy, I can't remember all of them now. 1930 Stearns, which was like a limousine now. Between the front seat and the back seat, there was a jump seat. So it would be actually 6 passengers, 7 passengers. Anyway, and the different cars. And when he'd go away on trips, he sold car wax polish. He'd go up to San Francisco to try and sell it. He'd have me drive these, one every day of the week, to keep them running, because they had to keep the batteries up and keep them functioning. He knew that keeping a vehicle running was the best, especially back then. So he made me feel good too, and I guess that's how I learned to enjoy driving and taking care of cars and preventative maintenance. He taught me a lot about it. So did my dad. Before I was old enough to drive, he had me back the car out of the driveway, and we had to take the plugs out and clean them once in a while and check the points and so on. So because of things like that, I felt like I was worth something, and it made me think when I graduated, summer of 42, the teachers had to get jobs during the summer to keep them going. And when I went to F.E. Olds and Son, that made musical instruments, and they had a lean-to they put up out inside, and we had a draw bench, if you know what that is. It draws tubing out, and we make all these tubings to make the air cooler for the P-38. And they needed people, so I went to see them after the first few days I was there. And said, they're paying real well. I forget what it was now. Making good money. And besides that, during lunch hours we have jam sessions. And he enjoyed that. We'd go upstairs, and they used to make instruments out of the weirdest conception. A trumpet, instead of just going out and back and around, they'd make it go all kinds of corners, rock behind and stuff. Playing around, but they had good tones. F.E. Olds was one of the best musical instruments you could buy. So anyway, this teacher that treated me so well, we'd start driving back and forth together. Swing shift, 4 to midnight. Anyway, those are some of the people that made me feel good about myself. My self-esteem went way up. I forget what some of the other questions were, but
What did you guys think of the world just before World War II? What did you think about things that were happening in Germany or in Japan? Did you even think about them much, or what?
not too much. I knew it was wrong, and my folks, of course, saying how terrible it was that all this killing would go on.
Whenever we'd go to movies, they had the shorts where you see these things happening. in the
Newsreels.
movies.
By shorts, you mean newsreels.
Yeah.
Between the two, you usually have a double feature, they call it, 2 different movies. For example, one of them we went to at the Eagle was Thin Ice and Hot Water, something about hot water, but 2 different. I thought that was a good combination. 2 different movies, but in hot water, that means you're in bad. And skating on thin ice, you're taking. Those are 2 movies. But between them, they'd show us news clips. So we know pretty much what's going on, listen to the radio. But I didn't keep up with it much like I do now. More interesting. My parents did, thought it was pretty bad. And didn't think too much about the politics. I remember listening to some of the talks with FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He made a lot of sense about how he was trying to handle things. But my 2 brothers, of course, were conscientious objectors. My oldest brother was studying to be a minister, and he was, I guess, a minister by then, wasn't he? Yeah, he was a minister in Colorado. The other brother just signed up as a conscientious objector. I mean, he wouldn't sign up and go to the draft. They finally came and got him, FBI, put him in an internment camp. But I don't know what gave it to me, the feeling of patriotism. I thought we should fight for our country. And this is our country, we shouldn't let things happen. And I listened a lot to Roosevelt's talks, which I think made a big difference. So when the draft came, I went. Is that what you mean by?
Grandma, what did you think? Did you?
I don't think I thought too much of it until we were married and he was gone. And I paid very close attention to what was happening in the area he was in, and also what was happening over in the Pacific side of the ocean, particularly after VE Day and stuff. My dad listened to news all the time, and I hated it. I had to do all my studying in the same room, and I have never been able to really concentrate when other things are going on around me, especially noise. And
Even though it's nice music, some of my CDs I have now, but it's on, so I turned it off the other day. Some days it's worse than others, but it's all the difference. When she was a loner, you might say, growing up by herself, she had silence, she studied, she got good grades, and they kept praising her. This is why. When I grew up, the 4th kid, the radio was on. Once we got a radio, which wasn't. We first started out on a crystal set. She mentioned that before. Do you know what a crystal set is?
Yeah.
Not a radio, no speaker. You had to put
Right.
headphones and just find a spot on a crystal to pick up enough. Anyway, I still have some. We had radios then, and I could study in my own way while listening to the radio and while conversation, because all of us, we didn't have a very big house. We all had to do our studying and things very noisy. Someone's doing dishes. So I learned to listen and think and do 2 or 3 things at once. Maybe not very well when it came to homework, but I could do 2 or 3 things at once. I still can.
Grandpa mentioned about, you can tell he was a good driver, that these people trusted him, and he has always been a very good driver. When I was, I guess 15 and a half, that you could go and get a temporary license to take to get your driver's license, and my dad took me over to Glendale with him for some kind of business he was going on, and we stopped at the DMV, and I said, what are we doing here? And he says, oh, you're going to go in and get a driver's license. I said, I don't want to learn how to drive. I just don't want to learn how. I'm not interested in it. And he says, every girl should know how to drive in case of an emergency. So come on in, you're going to take the test. And that really bothered me because I missed 3 and had to take it over. Here I'd never been interested or studied the laws or anything. I just guessed at a lot of it.
And she still doesn't like to drive because of that. Never has really liked to drive.
I guess I just wanted to be wealthy and be driven everywhere.
Oh. In our family, it was the other way around. We couldn't wait to get old enough to drive. Of course, being the youngest, I saw my brothers driving, and my sister got to. But we got a lot of experience together, which bothered her. I got to drive long before I had a license, out in the desert and stuff. And like I said, backed the car out of a driveway, which was a very steep driveway and very narrow. But anyway, I don't know, just always enjoyed mechanical things.
And talking about the radio, what did you guys have any particular things you'd like to listen to on it?
Oh, yeah. You go first. I know what I'll
Little Orphan Annie, Jack Armstrong, The
The All-American Boy.
Fly.
Oh, Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy.
Oh.
You got to put that in there.
Okay. And I would have liked to have listened to One Man's Family, but I wasn't allowed to. I had to be in bed by 8 o'clock, and it was on at 8.
We always listened. I got to listen.
So after we got married, we listened.
Even sometime, I remember a couple times coming down out of the mountains for some reason. And the radio would fade in and out. You know, we'd pull off the side where the radio was. It sounded good. Stay there and listen to the whole program. We were hooked. You know what One Man's Family is? You probably never heard of it. It was a good story about a family. The Barbers, and Father Barber was the head of the family. It was one of the better programs. But we liked a lot of the kids' programs. And of course, Jack Lenny. And I can't think of them now. Bob Hope, yeah, some of them are on now. They still have the repeats Saturday nights, 40, 50 years ago.
You had to be in bed by 8 o'clock, Grandma?
Yes.
Until you were graduated from high school? Or?
I think probably when I got out of high school, I got to stay up till 9, I don't know. Well, I think in high school, I had so much studying to do some nights, I stayed up till 10. But they tried to get rid of me as soon as possible. Everything was done like in a room like this. Everybody's together and annoying each other.
I was thinking what else would you like to listen to? Fibber McGee and Molly. You've probably heard that, haven't you? Fibber McGee's Closet. You haven't even heard that?
The Great Gildersleeve.
Yeah, great. Henry Aldridge.
Oh,
all kinds of
and not Inner Sanctum, but there's another one similar
Oh,
to
yeah, The
that.
Squeaking Door. Yeah, I have to think of some of these for a while. There were a lot of programs that we liked.
They had some pretty good radio programs.
Well, you've heard of The War of the Worlds with Wells. That's been well recognized up until just recently again. One of the first things when they fooled everyone, thought there was really being invaded by Martians. And had people calling the FBI and so on. That's a pretty good radio, but in a lot of ways I still think radio is better than TV because you saw it in your mind's eye. And the actor didn't have to look the part the way we thought they, because you didn't know what they looked like.
There was Lux Radio Theater, that was very nice. And what did we try out for that time where he gave you a cigar and you gave it back to him?
when we were in New York, Radio City?
No, we tried out in Hollywood for a program.
I don't remember.
He always had a cigar in his pocket. He was kind of thin and small man.
We'll have to go over this and come back with your story sometime, instead of wasting time. There are a lot of radio programs I like. I still do. I still listen to Paul Harvey whenever I can. When you listen to him for 20 years. He was the commencement speaker at your mother's BYU. Did you know that?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
And he was on the air long before that. How long ago was that she graduated from BYU?
30 years?
30 years. So he's been on the air a long time. At one time was the most listened to commentator in the world. And he's still on every day at noon.
Kristen is older than you, isn't she?
Yes.
Kristen was about to be born when your mom graduated.
Yeah. She was born in 70. Now you mentioned TV. When did you hear about TV for the first time, and what did you think about it when you first heard about it? What were
I don't know.
what did people think about it?
When Ken was shipped out from New York, and we were at New Jersey, one of our evenings was spent taking the underground railroad.
Yeah,
Is it
what they call
what
the
you call
L in some place. What do they call it? The
Went
subway
under the
system.
Hudson River.
The subway in New York. It's the tube in London, and metro in Paris. Anyway, whatever it's
subway.
called in New York.
So anyway, we ended up in Grand Central Station, and I asked an officer who was nearby. I knew that Times Square, we'd heard a lot about that. In fact, there was a program, I think, from Times Square. We asked where it is, and he says, "You're standing right by it."
Right in it.
But they were having brownouts at that time. You weren't allowed to have very much light at all anywhere. And there
You know
were
why,
times
don't you?
when there was blackouts and everyone's home had to be blacked out. Nobody could see light.
So if there's ships out there trying to shell us or planes come over, if there's a threat, you couldn't see their targets.
Anyway, while we were there, we went to an automat where we got our food automatically by sticking money in and out it comes. We went to Times Square Music Hall. Was that what it was?
Yes.
Craft theater?
What's it called?
Radio City Music.
Radio City
Yeah,
Music
that's it.
Hall. We were taken on a tour of the building and got to go clear up to the top of the building and see different things. But they took us through a TV station, and Grandpa was actually on TV.
Well, it was closed TV. You were well, present. So we got to see what we looked like on a closed circuit TV. And that was about the first I was really exposed to television. That would be the thing of the future. This wasn't until 44. We were married in 44. So it'd been out a long time before that. We just didn't have such thing.
Had you heard about it before then?
Well, I'm sure I heard about it, but I've never really seen it.
In fact, in 1952, about some friends of ours babysat for their doctor, and they had just gotten a TV, a personal one. It was only about this big, and that was the first person, family that we knew that actually had a TV. And when Nick was about 4 years old, he was having rheumatic fever, and someone,
When Dr. Crow gave us their old,
was he the
Black
one
and
who
white, I
gave
think
it?
so.
I know my visiting
Yes,
teachers
old black
came
and
to
white.
visit and brought a TV, and I did not want a TV in the house. But what do you do when you have a child in bed all the time who had bathroom privileges only? I had to spend all my time reading to him and playing games with him so he would stay in bed.
Why didn't you want a TV in your house?
Because I thought it would be a bad influence.
she had
Time.
good foresight.
And then later on, my grandparents got a new TV, and we were given their old one. by means of my parents. So, what do? They were all given to us and we didn't want them. I didn't want them. I think he did. He fell in love with them.
Well, depends how you use it, like we were telling you.
But I thought kids would be watching TV rather than reading or playing games
Which is true.
or doing homework or things like that. But it is destructive to family organization, really, in a lot of ways. Now, we know that TV can be used in very constructive, good ways, and in bad ways you have to learn to put limits on what you do so that you're using it in the best way possible. Which, having children watch TV as a babysitter, I do not usually go for that sort of thing. One woman's opinion.
Now, let's see. We were talking about the 1950s now. I'm kind of moving on here. What, in the 1950s with things like Martin Luther King and he's more later 50s, during the 60s, what were did you hear a lot about things that were happening in the South, and what did you guys think
A lot
about
of propaganda.
Yep. And I still know it's all propaganda. I think a lot of people still don't know. But he was a real rabble-rouser. That's what a lot of my friends said. Causing trouble. But I know he's done a lot of good, too. I followed his biography and stuff. But at the time, I know the FBI and a lot of the law enforcement people thought he was a real troublemaker. Other than that, I didn't follow politics too much. Not like I do now.
But we did hear a lot about it, but just like TV is today, it's often one-sided.
Mhm.
You don't get the whole picture. And you have to remember that and just not say, hey, it was on TV. Or I read it in a book, because not all books are that reliable. You have to compare against other things and make wise choices.
Okay. Well, that's good.